Hey, First Impressions family, I got a question for you. When was the last time you had an awesome drive-thru experience? You pulled up for that blessed Jesus chicken at the Chick-Fil-A. You order a number 4 with a large fry and a peach milkshake, but hold the sauce. Did somebody repeat back your order to you to tell you what you'd asked for? Did they give you the total of what you could expect to pay when you got to the window? Now think about the opposite. Think about the bad experience you've had recently. You know, the one where you pull up, you say what your order is going to be, and you wait that eternal, awkward silence just for someone to finally say, "Pull to the first window, please." You have no idea what to expect. You had 2 totally different experiences here. The first one left you with a great first impression before you ever left the order screen. They listened attentively to your needs. They reflected it back to you and set clear expectations. And odds are they delivered on the promise, right? But in the second case, you're just hoping you're going to get out of here without paying $30 for a burger that was made the wrong way. It doesn't matter if you work in food service or if you work in the field of ministry, we all share the same purpose. We are entrusted with the care of people. And I would argue our ability to deliver on that promise every day depends on our ability to use systems and strategies well. My name is Kate Brown. I work for Faith Church in Florence, Alabama. We have 3 campuses across 2 different states, and right now we're looking at about an average attendance of 2,500. Now, I have 2 jobs at Faith Church. One is I am my lead pastor's executive assistant, which has everything to do with the systems and strategies we use. Don't tell my boss, but my favorite job is my second position. I direct our guest services teams at the main campus. And what I've learned from these 2 things is a couple things. Number 1, if we're going to set welcome atmospheres for our guests, it starts with developing relationships with the volunteers who welcome them each week. But the second thing is, we can only do that if we're using systems that God has put in our disposal. You know, I think often in ministry, we begin to wonder why we need mechanisms, why we need these things to hold us accountable. If God's gifted and equipped us to love people, shouldn't we just be able to do that naturally? But the reality is we need systems. Think back to that fast food example I just gave you. If you pull up to the window, I don't care that somebody had to write down my order and process it through a computer to satisfy me. Listen, I'm 9 months pregnant. All I know is they gave me a peach milkshake and satisfied my craving and sent me on my way. They have my loyalty forever now. It's the same with systems. It doesn't matter that they didn't remember my order, that they had to write it down, because intentional effort will always trump a reliable memory. I'll give you an extreme example. It's hilarious. It's one that makes me laugh every time, but it's a little ridiculous. I used to work for a business where I shared a hallway with about 8 other coworkers. And there was this one named Stephanie who had a loud alarm go off on her phone every day at 3 p.m. It was like a reminder to do something. So one day my coworkers and I got annoyed and curious enough to figure out why we were hearing this daily alarm. One day we went to her office at 3 p.m. when she wasn't there, grabbed her phone, and saw in big bold letters across the screen, "Love Randall today." Randall was her husband, if you couldn't guess. And we ragged on her for this for months. Like, who has to set a daily reminder for themselves to love their husband or love their spouse today? Well, let me ask you a question. Do you have your anniversary on your calendar? Do you have your spouse's birthday on your calendar? That intentional effort means so much more than a reliable memory does. And the thing that Stephanie was doing is using these systems well to recognize the gift of the marriage God had given her. She took that time every day to reflect on it, but it also reminded her to steward her marriage well, to be a good wife. And if I'm being honest with you, Stephanie probably had the strongest marriage of any of us on staff at that time. So I would argue God gives us systems to sustain our relationships. And today, I want that to be our focus. Let's talk about some ministry systems we can use, creating welcoming environments, appreciating our guests and volunteers in a way that's a sizable investment, but at a minimal cost. I will challenge you on one thing though. Before we get into these systems, I want you to remember to have a growth mindset about them. There will be some things I'll tell you right now that are not going to be news to you. You've maybe heard it before. But if you have 15 to 30 team members right now and you say, you know what, this stuff is easy for me to remember, I don't have to deal with this system, how will God ever entrust you with 150 volunteers? How about 30 to 300? How can God continue to grow your teams unless you're putting systems in place right now to prove to Him that you're ready? So let's get into these systems. The first one I want to talk to you about is the oldest trick in the book, but it has the power to make your volunteers month. And that's just the power of a well-written thank you note. The thing about thank yous is they give you the opportunity to, yes, acknowledge the service and the sacrifice of your team member, but they also remind you just how instrumental they are to your ministry's success. Now again, I've told you I'm pregnant. I have written 67 thank you notes in the past month for gifts I've gotten. But let me tell you, my biggest pet peeve is when someone writes a thank you note and they say, "Dear Kate, thanks for the wedding gift. We'll put it to good use. Love you, the newlyweds." In my mind, I'm like, do you even know what I got you? Like, did you waste time and effort and postage just to say a generic note that you wrote to everybody else? No, we should be specific in the way we acknowledge other people. Andy Stanley talks about that in one of his LeaderCast episodes. So that's how I want to start us off. I'm going to give you a simple 3 to 5 sentence system you can use for making the perfect thank you and gratitude for your teams. The first one is give them an individualized compliment, not that generic blanket statement. Give them something that relates only to them. So that might look like saying, "Ryan, you're the first person to show up on the job each day, and you're the last to leave." That's not something that just anybody can say they've done, but Ryan knows that you went out of your way to acknowledge that for him. The second thing, remind them of their kingdom impact. Remind them that their attitude goes so much further than today. So an example of that might be saying, others know the love of Christ because of the way you show His love through your sacrifice. And then finally, leave them with an eternal perspective. The favorite way for me to close a thank you note is by saying, while I can never thank you enough, God is eager to reward your excellence. You make us better. Signed, Kate. One more reminder I want to give you about thank you notes really quickly is that you have the opportunity to be the best source of validation somebody has this month. You may be the best thing they hear in their career, in their family lives. In that same LeaderCast episode, Andy Stanley says that unexpressed gratitude equates to ungratefulness. How many people do we know in our church, in our teams, that are walking around right now wondering if they have any value in their circumstances? But you have the opportunity to change that by expressing specific thanks to them. The second system I want to talk to you about is one called workflows. If you are like us and you use Planning Center as your people database in your church, I know not all of you use the same thing. Some will use CCB, some will use other kinds of CRMs, but my church uses Planning Center, so it is the one that I can speak to experience on. And it's not necessarily a free tool. Your church pays for it for sure. But if you're not making use of this free resource within Planning Center, you're missing out totally. If I'm honest with you, I wish I could spend all day right here just talking about the power of workflows. But unfortunately, we have a time limit. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you a bird's eye view of what this system looks like for me. And if you want help building it, if you go back to your church, your organization, and you say, that could really make a difference in how I operate with my teams, reach out to me. My email address is kbrown@igotofaith.com, and I'll be happy to help you get that set up. Build a custom system that works for you and your teams. So here's what mine looks like, and I'm just giving you kind of an idea. You can see I've got 10 different steps plus on mine. But there are 3 major segments, and that's what I want to talk to you about. All of these first steps have to do with the assimilation process, the first stage of a volunteer on my team. When they sign up to serve on a team and they select guest services for the Florence campus, I get an automated notification letting me know that they're there waiting to connect with me. So my first few steps take me through those basics of the introductions, getting them on a schedule, getting them on a team that's the right fit and the right time for them. But then we move into the real meat of the workflow, and that is the follow-up stage. It's about 30 days in when they've really had the opportunity to learn the job. I'll check back in with them and say, is this what you thought it would be? Is this where you feel like you're thriving on a team, because that's where we need you? And then we start moving into the third stage and the most important stage. That's that relational follow-up. So about 3 months in, I'll write them that handwritten thank you note that we just talked about. But at this point, 3 months into them serving, I should have a pretty solid relationship with my volunteers. I should be able to crack jokes about their 7 kids or their crazy dog, whatever the case may be. We should be building relationships there. And then finally, about 6 months to a year in, I'll take some time to sit with them one-on-one. And I know the budgets look different for every church. Sometimes you might be working on your personal budget. Sometimes your church will be more lenient. You can take someone to lunch, you can grab them a coffee, and that's a great investment to make, but you can never overestimate the value of just some one-on-one individual time with somebody. Make it convenient for them. Attend a ball game of their kids and just spend some time getting to know them better. Meet with them maybe in between services at church. Just spend some one-on-one time getting to know them and really letting them know, I haven't forgotten that you're here. You are still valuable to me. It is still important for us to be building this relationship together. And one more thing I want to remind you of with workflows before we leave this system is the power they have to document your conversations. Right now, again, if you've got a small team of volunteers or if you're having one conversation with somebody on a Sunday, it might not be so stressful for you to remember the details of their lives. But let's say that Jeff comes and tells you he needs to take a 6-month break from serving on your team because of a surgery he's got upcoming. Well, right now you can remember that well, yes. But 6 months from now, when you have 30 more team members that have come on, do you remember what date it was that Jeff told you that? Do you remember to invite him back? Do you know the details of where his surgery and recovery stands? These are all questions that you can document in a way that takes pressure off of you to remember everything, but enables you to keep up with people so that they don't fall through the cracks in the process too. The third system I want to talk to you about is probably like the most sterile one you can think of to begin with, but it is the secret sauce behind my relationships with my team members. It's just the power of a simple calendar update. When you have a team member that tells you of something significant they have coming up, what's your tendency to do? To say, yeah, I'll pray about that. And with every good intention, you hope that you do it and you maybe remember to that one time. But if you put it in your calendar, you're a lot more likely to remember it, to set time aside to pray for them. And even more, set yourself a 2-week follow-up. Check in with them and see how that situation is going. They will think the world of you for having thought of them. Like I said earlier, it's not about having a reliable memory. Gosh knows you have all these chaotic conversations on a crazy Sunday, and you can't be expected to remember them all. But what you can do is make an intentional effort right there to document what's going on in their lives and to commit to walk through it with them. 1 Thessalonians 5:11 says, therefore encourage one another and build one another up just as you're doing. The word that's used here for build is the same exact word that's used for the construction process, which means it's not just a one-time deal, it is an ongoing investment. Sometimes it requires energy and sacrifice and time, but building requires consistent effort. This is what God's idea is of us for the church as a family, that we're continually working and investing in each other's relationships. So that's what I want to encourage you with. It will save you, again, the pressure of remembering all the details, but it will also spare you from that most embarrassing line that you and I have probably had to use before. You know what? I'm so sorry. I got busy. I meant to check in with you. I forgot about it. Life got crazy, and it did. But if you will take time to document things for yourself and set those reminders, just like my coworker Stephanie did, you will be good to go. And finally, there's one more system I want to share with you. The last system I want to share is actually a shared leadership structure. Now, I don't know how your church operates or your services, but we have multiple service times, and my guest services teams operate on a bi-weekly basis, meaning I've got alternating teams. Within a parking team or an usher team, I believe in shared leadership to take ownership of those teams, because just because you're the only paid person doesn't mean you should carry the weight of the ministry on your own. So I will have a team leader who's over each of my teams. Like I said, parking, usher, first-time guest, that kind of thing. But underneath them is a service leader. And that service leader is like the boots on the ground leader for their particular service time on their particular Sunday. There are three main purposes this serves. The first is, of course, logistical. If there are holes in our schedule, if we're missing some team members that day and we need to fill some gaps, the team leaders can really do that. They can pull the troops together and find ways to plug the holes in the system. But that's just the afterthought, if I'm being honest. The most important thing second most important thing is relational. Because I'll tell you one thing I've learned. I have a team of 200 volunteers, which means when we get together on Sundays, we huddle, we pray before the service. Somebody might not always feel comfortable sharing what's going on in their lives with 199 other people in the room, but what they will do is share it with their team of 8 people, 10 people, 20 people in their private circles after the fact. And while I can't touch base with all 200 people on a Sunday, their service leader hears that, and their service leader can pass the flow of information up to the team leader and myself, so that way we can be praying and we can be invested in what's going on in their lives too. So it is operational. It is relational. Most importantly, it's spiritual. Shared leadership is not just like a great business idea or strategy that we've come up with and it's worked for our church. It is the model that is commanded by the first century church leadership. Paul talks about this in 1 Corinthians when he says, don't say, I'm of Paul, I'm of Apollos, I'm of Cephas. We have many church leadership people, positions, that kind of thing. But more than that, we're baptized under Christ. We serve the same purpose, and our goal is the same, to spread the gospel. So the disciples, as they're developing the church, they would have to train and equip leaders to take the reins from them and run with it, to spread that good news. That's what you and I are called to do as well. And here's the biggest benefit in all three categories for my shared leadership structure. The next time Faith Church has a church plant somewhere else in another city, another location, I know exactly who I can send to be my parking team leader at that campus. Even better, I know who's going to replace him at the main campus, and I know who will replace that service leader. We should always be duplicating ourselves, duplicating leadership, and developing more leaders, again, to grow the gospel, not just keep it inside our 4 walls, but to take it globally. So I ask you now, we've reviewed these systems, we've thought of different ways we can take care of our people, and there are 4 specific ways that you can be intentional that we've talked about today. The first one, of course, is all about that gratitude, making sure your teams know that they are a part of something special in your family. The second one is making sure you're keeping track of your follow-through, that you're taking good care of them no matter where they are in their spiritual walk. The third is walking through their situation with them. Whether they're on the mountaintop or in the valley right now, you have the greatest privilege of caring for them. Do you have a system that's going to allow you to do that? And then in the fourth, to take everything we've done and to spread the gospel and take it out even further, to ensure greater care for even more people. So I ask you to take some time and really reflect on your ministry. Where is somewhere you can start today to build systems to take better care of your people? It might be in your databases, it might be on your Sunday schedule, but what kind of opportunities do you have to make use of the systems God has put at your disposal to take better care of people and create welcome environments.